Welcome to day 2 of the 2022 challenge. In this challenge, what I'm attempting to do is, in the run-up to the A-level sociology exams, I am going to try and answer 20 marks of questions every weekday between now and the end of May, when the first sociology exam is. We're on the second day. I've posted the question this morning. The questions were: outline and explain 2 ways that in-school processes impact on social class differences in achievement. And that was for 4 marks. Question 2, outline and explain 3 ways social class identity can be shaped by in-school processes in education. That's for 6 marks. And then the item question, item A, some sociologists claim that a pupil's home background will influence their educational achievement. Parental attitudes, leisure activities, and exposure to cultural knowledge all play a part in a pupil's achievement, as does family income. And the question is, applying material from item A, analyse 2 ways home factors may provide middle-class pupils with an advantage in educational settings. Now, that third question was a little bit of a twist on what we normally see, which is where we normally talk about social class differences, and people tend to focus on working class pupils, but we've also got to focus on the advantages that certain groups have. So let's look at how we will answer these questions. So earlier today, I sent out this image on both Twitter and Instagram, and what it does is it highlights 6 kind of ways in which you could have answered the social class and education question. I'm going to show you my 2 responses in a minute. Some of the things you could have talked about was the working class more likely to be in lower sets and streams, the design of the curriculum by middle class, particularly teachers, puts working class kids at a disadvantage. Labelling of working class pupils as no hopers, which is based upon negative stereotypes. Use of the elaborated code places working class kids at a disadvantage. Limited recognition of working class cultural capital in education, or teachers perceiving middle class attributes to be the ideal for pupils to display. Now, because the question is focusing on social class achievement, you can go either way with this. You can talk about underachievement of working class kids, or you can talk about higher levels of achievement of those from middle classes. I've put these 2 as my responses. So my first response: 1 way in which in-school processes impact on social class differences in educational achievement is through teacher expectations. Becker found that teachers are more likely to have higher expectations of middle-class pupils, as they were more likely to possess attributes that teachers thought were those of the ideal pupil, and so would push them harder to achieve higher grades. First line, I've identified a way in which it occurs, and in the second line, I've explained how that works. And I've made this explicit link to educational achievement at the bottom line there. They would push them harder to achieve higher grades. So that would be 1 + 1. Second way in which in-school processes impact on social class differences in educational achievement is through the design of the curriculum. As the curriculum is designed by the middle class, it reflects their interests of what is important information, and as such, middle class pupils with similar interests are placed at an advantage over the interests of working class students, enabling them to achieve higher. So I've gone in this question with both responses looking at why middle class pupils overachieve. I did put out some reasons why working class kids underachieve on the images. However, you can go either way. You could do 2 that are working class underachievement, you could do 2 that are middle class overachievement, or you could do them in the case of 1 underachievement for the working class, 1 middle class achieving higher, I should say, rather than overachieving. Our second question looked at how schools shape class identity. Now, again, this is a question that's come up on a 10-mark question, particularly in school processes and identity. It came up maybe 2017, 2018. 1 way is which the polarization of working class boys leads to the development of a subcultural identity. Second way, the rejection of cultural capital leads working class to assume that education is not for them. A third way, negative labelling based upon appearance or their habitus causes lower self-esteem. Another way is the rejection of working class girls. So we're bringing in a little gender angle on here as well, seeing that the working class girls with ultra feminine identities as being unintelligent. Sifting and sorting pupils into vocational areas rejects the working class as unacademic, and this would be the idea that working class kids are more likely to end up doing vocational courses, particularly things like construction, vehicle maintenance, things like that. They're more likely to be sifted onto BTECs. If you go to independent schools, they won't do vocational qualifications. It'll all be A levels, and even in most places baccalaureates. And the final one, the curriculum is focused on middle class habitus. It rejects the knowledge that working class pupils may have. Working class pupils have lots of knowledge, and lots of knowledge that is practical and useful, and lots of knowledge that can gain them careers. However, the education system tends to focus on the knowledge that the middle class have, mainly because it's written by the middle class. So that puts working class kids at a disadvantage, and it means that they feel like education is not for them. So how have I answered this question? Again, 3 responses. Each way I've identified a way, and then I've explained how it works. So one way in which social class identity can be shaped by in-school processes is through setting and streaming. This process leads to working class boys becoming polarised as they are placed in lower sets and streams, and they develop anti-school subcultures, which in turn lead them to reject educational success as part of their social class identity. A second way in which social class identity can be shaped by in-school processes is through the curriculum. As the curriculum is based upon the habitus of the middle class, these pupils will perceive education as being part of their identity and look to progress further in education. So there's a little bit of this idea of education being part of your identity, and whether you won't want to pursue education. So the first point is saying that working class are more likely to reject education, whereas the second point is saying that middle class are more likely to embrace education. A final way in which social class identity can be shaped by in-school processes is through the rejection of working class tastes. Archer found that working class pupils felt rejected by education because of the clothing they wore by teachers and the middle class pupils. Okay, so we've got 3 reasons and how it's shaped their identity, all identified there. The item question. Now the item question, we'll look at the actual item in a minute, but we're going to highlight some of the ways in which the middle class gain advantages through their home background on this image. Again, it was sent out via Twitter and Instagram today. First of all, more likely to attend events that have high cultural value. Okay, so things like the theatre, the opera, and we can build on this point with the next point. Cultural capital is gained through leisure activities such as books and discussions, more likely to read serious fiction or biographies, more likely to watch documentaries and serious drama on television. And also they will gain cultural capital through world events and things like that. Parental employment will be in professions with higher levels of education, which means they may have more opportunities to network, they may have more opportunities for work experience, and their parents may put more pressure on them to go down that road. Parents will be more invested in education and push children to achieve higher. They know the value of education, so therefore they want their children to achieve highly as well. Financial capital means pupils will have better access to resources and tuition. This can be anything from private tuition, access to online resources, the ability to buy more books, the ability to go to workshops, things like this. That means they'll have better access to additional information. And the other one which links to financial capital is selection by mortgage. Parents will have, but particularly middle class parents, have financial capital, and they can move to areas where there are better schools for their children. You can even link into that. So like I said, they could potentially send their kids to independent or private schools as well. But as we do with the item question, what we need to do is we need to look at the item and we need to pick out the hooks. So in this item, it says some sociologists claim that a pupil's home background will influence their educational achievement. Parental attitudes, leisure activities and exposure to cultural knowledge all play a part in pupils' achievement, as does family income. So there's some pretty obvious hooks in there for you to play with. There's quite a few hooks, I would say. I've highlighted these ones, so parental attitudes, leisure activities, exposure to cultural knowledge and family income, and we can link these into some of the ideas we've already discussed. So material factors obviously links to family income. Cultural capital, that can be anything from parental attitudes, leisure activities or exposure to cultural knowledge. Parental education and parental attitudes tend to be linked. Parental occupation, we could link in there to sort of like parental attitudes to that have developed as a result of their occupation, and parental expectations, again parental attitudes, and how this can then link into pushing their children further. So I've put 2 reasons down here again, just to kind of hint what to do with the hooks is make sure you explicitly reference them. Some people say that you can get credit for them if you mention them implicitly, and you're likely to touch on them anyway. I say don't take the chance. I say make sure that you identify to the examiner that you've used the item. It's a very simple thing to do, and what it will do is it will mean that the examiner's left in no doubt that you've made a reference to the item. One way home factors may provide middle class pupils with an advantage in educational settings is through their leisure activities, item A. So there's our link. That's dealt with. Now we have to develop leisure activities, and how does that put middle class pupils at an advantage? Middle class pupils will be more likely to attend events that are seen as high culture, such as theatre trips and visits to museums. Furthermore, reading and television habits will have a positive influence on their education. Sullivan found that pupils who watch documentaries and read serious fiction are more likely to have higher educational achievement than those who do not. So we've linked in a bit of research here from Alice Sullivan in 2001, I think it was, who did a questionnaire with students and found that sort of like the books that their parents read and the books that they read and the documentaries they watched meant that it had a knock-on impact and they had higher educational achievement. This places middle class pupils at an advantage in educational settings, as it will provide them with cultural knowledge of content that is introduced in classrooms and a familiarity with the material. So we'll develop that point a little bit here. And one of the skills that you use in this is analysis. And one of the things you can do for analysis is contrast the experiences, compare and contrast the experiences of 2 different groups. So in the last line here, I've put, in contrast, their working class peers may not have had access to these experiences and have less familiarity with the material presented, which puts them at a disadvantage. So I've just analysed it a little bit by contrasting the experiences of 2 different groups. It's a good way to do some analysis. A second way in which home factors may provide middle class pupils at an advantage in educational settings is through family income. Middle class pupils will be able to access a greater range of resources than their working class peers due to their parents' financial capital. So we're making a comparison in here as well, a good bit of analysis. This could mean that their parents are able to afford to move into the catchment areas of high performing schools, or even pay for their children to attend an independent or private school that statistically achieve higher results. Furthermore, middle class pupils will benefit from being able to access additional educational resources such as books, laptops, and even private tuition that will put them at an advantage over their working class peers in educational settings who may not be able to access these resources. A couple of things in there. What I've done is I've not just gone family income and said selection by mortgage. I've linked the idea that they can move to better areas, or they can afford to pay for their children to go to better schools, with other aspects of material details, which gives me a little bit more depth to my answer. I'm not just focused on making a response that would be middle class pupils, they can afford private tuition, the end. What I've done is I've really developed and shown my greater understanding of how finance influences educational achievement, particularly for the middle class. Again, the other thing I've done as well is at the end I've said we'll put them at an advantage over their working class peers in educational settings. I'm linking back to the question to make sure that I've answered it. Okay, well hopefully that helped with day 2 of the 2022 challenge. As always, sort of like with these videos, I do give you a little bit of a kind of teaser of what will happen tomorrow. So I've given you the question for tomorrow's 2020 challenge, which is day 3. We're going to be looking at gender and education. 3 questions again. Outline and explain 2 ways that home factors influence gender differences in achievement. Okay, so what home factors might influence gender differences in achievement. Outline and explain 3 ways education helps to shape gender identity. So we're focusing on identity again, the different things that will shape male and female gender identities within the schools. And question 3, read the item and answer the question that follows. Item A, in recent years, girls have been outperforming their male peers at all stages of the education system. This has been explained by sociologists as being due to changes in the way children are taught and assessed, as well as the increased presence of women in educational roles. So the question there is then asking you to apply material from item A, analyse 2 ways in which in-school factors impact on gender differences in educational achievement. So the things you've got to focus on there, in school, so things that happen inside the school, and you've got to also make an explicit reference there to gender differences in educational achievement. So why is it that girls are achieving higher than boys? Why is it that boys are underachieving? And that's what you need to do for that type of question. So hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow, sort of like for the results of the kind of 2020 challenge. Thanks for watching.